welcome to the Matt and Kendall Hagee podcast. Kendall isn't with us today, but I do have a very special guest here in the studio with me. My friend has been an individual that has played a significant role in my life from the days of undergraduate studies at Oral Roberts University until just late last night. And it started out as an academic relationship because Dr. Mark Lewandowski was a professor of mine when I was going through undergraduate business school in Tulsa at ORU. And through the years, that relationship grew from being one of professor and student to being friends who were working together to solve different challenges, both in business and life. And now I would say a very dear family friend to the fact that my 4 children call him Uncle Mark. So there are a lot of people who call him Dr. Lewandowski, but Uncle Mark kind of has a special place in our hearts and in our homes. And he and I are going to have a conversation about something that I think is important for people to understand. And if I was going to give a title to this podcast and to this conversation, it would be The Currency of the Kingdom. And before we get into that, I would like to give Mark the opportunity to say hello to you and for you to hear his voice so you understand that this deep baritone voice that you hear across the couch is not Kendall with a head cold, but it's somebody different today. We've got a special guest. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Mark Lewandowski.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited about being called Uncle Mark. That's one of my favorite titles.
Absolutely. I mean,
maybe my favorite title.
If I walk into a room with you, my kids run to you because they get to see me all the time. So the conversation that we're going to have about the currency of the kingdom is something that I kind of coined that phrase after an evening in which you and I were discussing some of the successes that you experienced in business. And before I give you the opportunity to share that story, when I met you was right when this season of your life was taking place, because it was about 1996, 97, and I'm taking an undergraduate class at Oral Roberts, and you are teaching, but not only are you teaching at ORU in the evenings, you're also working on several different projects in business. And you've got 3 small children, and your wife is working as a waitress at Outback Restaurant. And I mean, you were at a stage in your life where you took every opportunity you had to move the ball forward, so to speak. And it's certainly a long way from where we met to where you are today.
Well, I'm really glad I'm not there now.
Oh, absolutely.
Those were some tough times. And I remember there was a time in that, we had 3 children and I was a full-time PhD student working every job I could imagine. And I came home one day and I said to my wife, if we're going to make it and if I'm going to finish this PhD, somebody's got to get a job, and I've already got 3 and you've got 3 kids. And she said, okay, no problem. I'll get a job waiting tables. And she got a job waiting tables, and we would I'd come home at 4 o'clock and we'd high five on the front porch, and she would leave and I'd walk in. I'd go in and take care of the kids while she was waiting tables. And it was a really, it was demanding, but it was a good time in our life for building character.
It did.
And character's not always that fun to build.
No, it was in this time of your life, being a person who's raised in a family with a tradition of faith and being in a Christian community in Tulsa, you got to hear a lot about giving. And, it was a conversation that was had quite a bit when I was a student there. You'd have individuals sitting in chapel services who were in debt up to their eyeballs and felt like if they didn't give a monetary gift to God, that they were going to fail to accomplish their faith and their service and duty to the kingdom. And I was always challenged with that because I couldn't understand how someone could give to their own detriment. And, I really want to be careful about how we move this conversation forward, because what I'm saying in regards to currency is that, you and I were having this conversation because I asked you, I said, Mark, tell me how everything changed. How did you go from being a busy PhD student, working 3 jobs, high-fiving your wife in the driveway, to being a successful CEO of a large company that is reaching several different parts of the nation and growing? and you said that you came to the conclusion that the currency that God cares about is not the currency of money. And when you said it, it was like a light bulb went off in my head that there is a heavenly currency that God does not keep in the U.S. Treasury. Tell me that story.
During that time, all my life, I grew up in the church and very committed to my faith, absolutely committed. At no point did I ever doubt God. I really grew up believing, and I believe what I heard because those are people that speak and they tell you that if you're going to get a harvest, you got to sow seed. And I believed it. I understood that.
Seed time and harvest is a biblical principle.
And it was something that Oral Roberts, I went to ORU and you went to ORU, Oral Roberts talked about that a lot. So in my mind the whole time, I knew of one currency. You tithe, you receive. You tithe, you receive. That was the only thing I knew. But here I am, a young man. By the time we were 25, we had 3 children. So we were just boom, boom, boom right away. Every time we bump into each other, we got pregnant. And so, here we are. We're young. We're 25. We got 3 kids and a mortgage. And I'm a PhD student, and we're doing everything we can do to survive, and we're barely making it. And I remember there was a time in which we were going to church, a really good church downtown Tulsa, and they called my wife one day and said, "Would you be interested in serving the church as the Sunday school teacher for the 1-year-olds?" Now, the reality is, and I've told you this, I was,
your whole life was a Sunday school class at that point.
My goodness, we were working so hard from early in the morning till night. We had very little time, almost no time to spend together, no free time. And I considered church as 2 solid, beautiful hours where I got to drop off my kids and selfishly enjoy myself, my wife, and my faith.
You got to sit in the sanctuary without having to take somebody to the bathroom.
I wasn't wiping noses or going to the bathroom. It was fantastic. And I remember being absolutely heartbroken when I heard that. And I prayed and I said, "Okay, God, I don't have any money. Every month after I get all my paychecks, I'm still $700 short. I remember it was still $700 short. How am I going to make that up other than hustling?"
Yeah.
So I remember
your hustle was wash windows. Yep. It was power wash driveways.
I was working at the PAC, moving furniture and scenery in for big shows, and then running them out at 2 a.m. and loading up the truck, going home, waking up at 6, going back to work.
I recall a few extra credit opportunities where if a student was willing to help you move a couch, they'd get a couple of points on a test or something.
I can't really speak to the accuracy of that right now, but
anyway,
going back,
useful.
I remember saying to my wife, "Okay," we prayed about it, and I said, "Okay, Lord, I got to talk to you, God. I don't have any money to give you. I don't have anything. But I will commit, Sarah and I will commit to 1 year, and we'll give everything we've got because this is all we've got." And I remember guilty, it was kind of a guilty feeling saying, "And if that's not good enough, I don't know what is." And I remember thinking, boy, am I saying the wrong thing? Am I dishonoring God by questioning him and saying, if that's not good enough, I don't know what I can do. I don't know how I can serve you. And I don't know exactly how to put that in words, but...
Well, I think it's very healthy to be honest about frustrations that people feel when it comes to the things of faith. The Bible says, work out your own salvation. And the thing I know about working out is that there's a struggle that comes with working out. It doesn't matter if it's a physical workout or an emotional workout or a spiritual workout. You are working and resisting and straining and lifting and trying to accomplish something that you don't have the natural or supernatural ability to do. And where you were at, and I remember this conversation very distinctly the first time I heard it, you had a sense of guilt because when you were going to church and they were taking the offering, you knew you were $700 short. And therefore, if you were going to take money out of your pocket and put it in the offering pan, you were going to be $700+ short. And as a man who was providing for his family, as a man who was trying to take care of his obligations to others, you could not in good conscience give that money knowing that you didn't have that money to give.
And at the same time, I was trying to break out of that feeling of being stuck in a situation that is just a constant struggle.
Correct. So you had this natural frustration, I don't have the money to give. And then you had this spiritual frustration,
Yes.
but I have to give. I know if I don't give, I don't receive. I know if I don't plant seed, there is no harvest. And suddenly it clicked in your head, this 1 hour of my time in that Sunday school class is the currency that I can give to God. Your time was just as precious to you as money, because the one thing that your situation was taking from you was your time. And when you had the opportunity to give time, you went to the Lord, and in a very honest way, you said, I need this to be the currency of our exchange. And therein lies the concept of kingdom currency, because the more I began to think about that from that conversation on, it struck me that God's currency is not dollars. God's currency is not coins. God's currency is not gold. Gold is what God uses for asphalt. So if we're so obsessed with the precious value of it here, it obviously doesn't have the same value in heaven. But when you look at the Bible, the currency of the kingdom is love. The Bible says, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind, with all of your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And when you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the Bible gives us a very clear indicator that God is very interested in love. This is what John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he did what? He entered into a currency exchange. He gave. What did he give? His only begotten Son, that whosoever believed in him would not perish but have everlasting life. The currency of the kingdom is love. And what God is asking every one of us every day is, do you love me enough? Fill in the blank. And there are times when he wants to know, do you love me enough to give monetarily? Do you love me enough to give of your strength, your natural service, your ability? Do you love me enough to yield? Give me your mind. Will you allow me to show you something that you might not know prior to this moment in time? And when you were so forthright about the fact that you and your wife decided that the one thing you had to give was time, and that hour was going to be your sacrifice to God, that there had to be another currency in the kingdom. And the thing that was very exciting about that for me was to hear how things began to open up for you as soon as you made that commitment.
You know, that time, right up into that time, it seemed like because I was frustrated and struggling financially, I was looking for every door to open that would break me free into a new level of earning that would alleviate all these problems. And it seemed like lots of opportunities came my way, but every time I got close, the door was shut. Every time. And it was really frustrating. And I was less frustrated than my wife. She would get really excited about an opportunity. It would fall apart, but then there'd be another one available. At least there didn't seem to be gaps where there was no possibility. There was always a possibility, but they would fall apart. And during that year, when we were teaching that class, I also finished my dissertation. And upon that completion, the doors just broke open and we became what I call too deodorant rich. Now, too deodorant rich is when, and if you've ever been really broke, you know what this is. Too deodorant rich is when you have enough money to use a coupon that says if you buy one, you get the other one for half price. Yeah. And so you open up your cabinet and you've got two deodorants standing there, so that when you run out of one, you got one right there. We used to joke about being too deodorant rich. Because when you're really broke, you just
you only get one deodorant.
You're using that deodorant down to the stick.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just
and
really
sometimes
rubbing
you're
it.
sharing.
That's right.
And so, you know, in that season, you were looking for something to change. And what changed is that you were willing to give God the free time that you had left, which was slim to none. And that sacrifice of going into that Sunday school class, God took that in heavenly places as currency because you did it in love. And with that, it was, you know, a few months later, you're sitting at the Outback Steakhouse in Tulsa, and you're there to see your wife because she's getting ready to go on break, and you're going to get a bloomin' onion and an unsweet tea. This was back when Sarah would let you eat a bloomin' onion, and you are going to have this opportunity to visit with her. But the gentleman that she's serving at the table, they're all businessmen. And just in conversation, what do you do? Well, I just graduated with a business degree. And the next thing you know, that conversation leads to another conversation, which leads to another conversation, which puts you in front of the people that you begin a very successful and thriving business with that still is a blessing in your life today.
Ironically, you mentioned the Outback. The Outback it was formed in Florida. It had just moved to Oklahoma. And it was a brand new, just growing franchise. And they were going to have a party, like a picnic, and they invited one server out of the whole restaurant chain in the area. They invited my wife to the party. And I was hanging out in the pool talking to a guy. I told him I really loved his watch, and someday I hope to have one like that. We got to chatting, and he hired me as a consultant. So that year, we went in just one moment from my wife being a servant our server at the Outback to me being a consultant to the entire franchise. And I learned during that period of time that God cannot be confined to what man believes he is. And I thought the only currency was dollars put in the plate. That's what I knew because that's what I'd heard. And I learned that God is much more dynamic, much more flexible, much more creative. And what he really wants is he wanted my willingness to serve him, which is love.
Yeah.
You said it perfectly.
Yeah, he wanted to hear Mark say yes. And, to that end, now that you're at a season in your life where resources are a lot more abundant than they were back in the high-fiving in the driveway days, you know that there's an obligation to give. This podcast is not about getting somebody a reasonable excuse not to sow seed. This is to say to people, seed is more than what you think it is. Seed is your time. Seed is your talent. Seed is your giving. Seed is your wisdom that you are willing to leverage into others. There are all kinds of things that you can do to give God the opportunity to help you, but you have to be willing to say yes in that moment and allow that currency to be exchanged in the kingdom.
I will say that excuse me, there was a time in which I didn't have financial seed to sow, but now I do. And now that seed that I sow is now a tool that God uses through a vehicle called the church. And when lots of like-minded people get together and give their tithe, there's an enormous amount of resources then to do great things. So I can leverage my money with other people's money to go and serve the community at a much higher level. So not only do we serve in a variety of capacities, but now I feel we have an obligation to share generously financially because God has given to us generously financially.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I would commend you for and celebrate you for on this podcast is your willingness to connect the dots. You never kept the service in the Sunday school class as an isolated event from you becoming a consultant for the Outback. You connected those two things. You recognized that when you engaged in this behavior, God opened up a door that you otherwise would not have had the opportunity to have opened. Yes, the Outback invited your wife, who was a waitress, to come to an event, and it was at that event that you happened to meet this individual. But out of all the people in that event, you spoke to the one person who could hire you as a consultant. You had a conversation with the one individual who was looking for the services you were providing. Sometimes people see these things and they go, well, that's just that's irony. That's luck. And you had enough wisdom to say, no, that's not luck. That's not irony. That's the hand of God.
I say this to my kids and people that I mentor all the time. When you're looking forward, it's hard to see God. But if you'll take the time to look backwards, you can see the steps he created for you all the time. It's a beautiful thing when you stop and look back and give God the glory for all the pieces and all the steps and the journey. And it's a foolish man that believes he did it all himself.
Absolutely.
It's a foolish man.
Well, and sometimes you look back and you think, how did we get through that?
And we was a group of three.
That's it.
Sarah and I and the Lord.
Yeah, how did we survive it? Well, for those of you who are listening, I hope that this conversation made a difference in your everyday life, that you understand kingdom currency is exchanged in love. If it's financial currency exchanged in love, if it's your hard effort and time and talent exchanged in love, God wants to exchange things with you through the currency of love. And I pray that that gives you some freedom today in the decisions that you have to make, and that you'll be willing to sow the seeds that God asks you to sow, because He's faithful to make sure that your harvest is going to come your way. I want to thank Dr. Mark Lewandowski for being my special guest today. Kendall will be back with us very soon, I assure you. And if there's anything that you'd like to hear us discuss, we'd certainly be glad to do that at any time that you want to. Reach out through the social media platforms. Share this podcast and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. We would greatly appreciate it. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.